What is going on, YouTube? I am Lamont at Large. Today I am at the Sacred Heart Catholic Cemetery here in Monroeville, Louisiana. I'm here to tell you the story about a man named Felix Mancla, a man who on November 23rd, 1953 chased a UFO and simply vanished off the face of the earth. Felix Eugene Moncla was born October 21st, 1926 in Mansura, Louisiana. Just a town about 5 minutes down the road from here, but yet he was pretty much raised as a kid here in Monroeville. He excelled at sports at a young age. He played high school football, and he was actually so good that he was offered an all-inclusive sports scholarship to play football at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. So he played football there. He got a bachelor's in science degree. And after he graduated, he decided to join the United States Army, and he fought in World War II. He was stationed in occupied Japan. After he was honorably discharged, he then enrolled at the University of New Orleans. And while he was there, the Korean War kicked off. Feeling a sense of patriotism and ultimately wanting to experience his lifelong dream of becoming a pilot, he joined the United States Air Force. He joins the Air Force, meets a woman, has 2 kids, becomes a family man, and as military families often do, they live in different bases, going around the country, so forth and so on. Finally settling in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, at the time he was stationed here in the United States, he was stationed at a U.S. Air Force base called Kinross, which is in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, kind of close to the Canadian border, around Lake Superior. And that's where he was stationed when on that fateful day, November 23rd, 1953, one of the radar techs at the base noticed that there was a blip on the radar. It was an identified flying object. They didn't know what it was. They had contacted the higher-ups of the Royal Canadian Air Force to ask them who that was and to let them know that they were flying in U.S. airspace. They contacted them back and said that wasn't any of their planes. The closest pilot to where that object was about 30 miles to the north. So immediately, fearing a possible Russian plane flying in United States airspace, you have to remember at that time there was this race to develop weapons, to develop technology. It was known as the Cold War, and it was the war between the United States and the Soviet Union, or freedom versus communism, whichever way you want to look at it. So they scrambled the jet. It was an F-89 Scorpion. At that time, jet propulsion technology was still pretty new to us, but we had got a lot of our technology from the Germans when we conquered Germany during World War II. So we're still improving on it then. They scramble a jet. So they get Felix Mancla and Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson. He was in on the plane with them. He was the radar operator. So they shoot up around 500 miles an hour. They're chasing this object at around 30,000 feet. And they're having a problem following the object on the radar, being that either it was moving too fast or they just couldn't follow it because how it was moving in the sky. They radio to the base for ground radar for them to send them directions on where the object is so they can follow it and chase it and identify it. So ground radar is watching this object, so they give instructions to Felix to drop down to around 8,000 feet and fly due southwest, and then they should be approaching the object pretty rapidly at that time. Felix drops down to 8,000 feet, and on the radar on the ground at the Air Force Base, the radar tech is looking at two blips on the screen, and they're getting closer together. They're pretty much heading towards each other in a direct fashion. They're getting closer, they're getting closer. Felix is no longer communicating on the radar, on the radio. And normally when two objects on the radar merge, they're simply passing each other, and then they separate on either opposite side, and then they venture off further and further away. But this did not happen. No, what happened was on the radar screen, when the objects came together, they became one. And the radar tech is looking, and he says the plane disappeared. Now, you would think that if they both ran into each other and they crashed, then they would both disappear off the radar. But no, the one object that they were following on the radar, still there. Felix and Robert and the plane are gone. They're presumed their crash. So they scramble two jets to go look for Lieutenant Wilson and Lieutenant Moncla. So the jets are scrambling in the area. The object just drifts off the radar and disappears into the night. So one of the pilots that was flying another F-89 Scorpion, about 40 minutes after Felix's plane disappeared, he hears on the radio some scratchy communication from Felix Mancla, and he could recognize his voice easy because Felix had a very thick Cajun accent, and he talked really slow, so it was very, very easy to discern his voice over any others. And so the pilot heard three words that he was able to hear in the radio broadcast, and it said, "We had better." Those were the only words that he was able to discern from that communication. So they're flying around. They don't see any wreckage. They don't see any signs of a crash. They simply disappeared. They vanished. A search team, a naval cutter, went looking through Lake Superior, ground troops looking on the ground for wreckage, and they never found any. Now, the pilot that flew in the Air Force for the Royal Canadian Air Force, he was the one that was about 30 miles off course, and he was interviewed by his higher ups because they knew he couldn't have possibly been that object. But maybe he was, maybe he lied, maybe the Canadian government was lying. And he was interviewed by his commanding officer, and he swore up and down. He's had many interviews online, on the radio, and he has always denied that he was anywhere near where they claimed he was. He was a good pilot. He knew where he was. He would have not encroached in U.S. airspace. That was a no-no. You can actually get in a lot of trouble for that. So why would basically somebody want to risk their career? They risk their career, messing around, going off of course. You don't do that. Not at all. So the accident report stated that it says that the Canadian airplane, which in the report says it was a C-47 Skytrain, veered off course and possibly crashed into the Scorpion being piloted by Felix Mancla and Robert Wilson. But when the Canadians were talking with the U.S. commanders, they let them know that it was actually a VC-912 that was being flown that day by Gerald Fosberg, not a C-47 Skytrain. So to this day, Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson and First Lieutenant Felix Mancla have never been found. Their bodies were never recovered. The wreckage to the plane has never been recovered. They simply vanished off the face of the earth. Now, I do want to say this. In 1968, off of the east coast shore of Lake Superior, there was a story of some kind of wreckage being found, possibly being the remnants of the plane from 15 years earlier, of the plane that Felix was piloting. And that would have been found on Canadian ground. One of the Air Force officers identifying the parts identified that plane as Felix's, but the Canadian government claims that never happened. There was never any search, and they pretty much don't know what that story is about or what they were talking about. MUFON, which stands for the Mutual UFO Network, they're basically a small collective of individuals who they investigate every UFO story there is online. They all volunteer, nobody's getting paid. And many of them have researched this story, and the government just simply brushed it under the rug. And that was it. He simply disappeared. Never to be seen or heard from ever again. They do not mention in the report of what happened to the other object, and that is it. And in 2006, there was a story about a company called the Great Lakes Dive Company. I think I got the name right. And they had reportedly claimed to have found the plane intact at the bottom of Lake Superior, and they had released images of what appeared to be an intact plane at the bottom of the ground. Now, a lot of UFO enthusiasts, reporters, they went to the dive location to see what was going on, and there was no dive company. The press release was fake, and that was another hoax. Simply one of the many, many disappearances of people, persons that happen all over the United States and the world, never to be seen or heard of ever again. Now, if you look in front of you right now, this is a memorial that is dedicated to the man who disappeared on that fateful day. And as you can see, the inscription says, "In loving memory of Felix Eugene Moncla, Jr., First Lieutenant, United States Air Force, born October 21st, 1926, disappeared November 23rd, 1953, intercepting a UFO over Canadian border as pilot of a F-89 jet plane." And this is all that is left in memoriam of that man. There was no body, there was nothing to bury. He simply vanished, never to be seen or heard from ever again. A very interesting story, to say the least. I always keep an open mind, when I hear about stories like this. We never know what's out there, and we never know what could possibly happen. Just an ultimately sad story, because 2 children did lose their father and a wife lost her husband. And to this day, it's a story that just kind of lives on in the UFO community's collective thought. Who knows what happened? Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think what happened. I have my own theories, but hey, who knows? At the end of the day, nobody was there. He simply disappeared. Anyways, I am Lamont at Large. Thank you for watching my vlog. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for all the thumbs up. Thank you for sharing my videos online, so forth and so on. I will catch up with you on the next vlog. Have a good day, guys. God bless and peace out.